I mean, years ago we talked about the globalization and how work was being distributed around
Yeah.
the world. And that's even accelerated with the advancements in technology, and now more and more to AI tools that can do real work.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we explore how people, process, policy, and technology drive effective change. This is Dr. Darren, Chief Enterprise Architect, educator, author, and most importantly, your host.
On this episode, the rise of the fractional worker, with special guest, gig economy expert, and fractional worker evangelist, Elizabeth Eiss.
All right, Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you, Dr. Darren.
Hey, I was really excited when we first talked, and I said, "Oh, I most definitely have to have Elizabeth on the show." This will be an entertaining topic today on fractional work, and the whole industry is changing. Right, so getting in front of that, I think, is critical. But before we drop into that, everyone that listens to my show knows I only have superheroes on the show. Every superhero has a background story, an origin story. So, Elizabeth, what's your origin story?
Well, superhero. Wow, what a way to start the day. Well, it's interesting. I am an entrepreneur today, and I never thought I came from a business background or an entrepreneurial background. My parents were both educators. And what was interesting about my childhood is we never lived longer than 3 to 4 years in one place. We moved. And in retrospect, my dad was an entrepreneur in education because he was a teacher, then a principal, and a superintendent of schools, and a university professor. And we moved every time instead of typically staying in one place, which many educators do. So even though I was the first kid to go into business, I really feel like my roots of entrepreneurism was my family, brought me up. We moved and we were resilient. We had to learn how to adapt and be open to change. So I think in a sense, that's kind of a superpower, being able to adapt, to be flexible, and get comfortable in a new environment.
Yeah, especially right now in the world we're living in, everything's in change. Everything's in chaos. And if you're not resilient, you just curl up in a ball and hope for the best. I don't know. I mean, so I have the opposite. I grew up in the same house.
Oh, wow.
And my parents lived in that house 35 years. And my dad was a dentist, but we lived out on a dairy farm. So he was a gentleman farmer, which taught us kids a lot of grit. Right. Milking
Getting up
cows
early
in the
morning.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And not to make money, my dad said I had that place to grow kids. So he did a great job with that. So I know about resilience.
That's a great story.
So let's talk about resilience a little bit in this economy that we have. We're seeing a major shift from staying at the same company for 35, 40 years and retiring. That promise that our parents in business made, and probably even when you started, Elizabeth, that was the goal, was you find a big corporation, you move up the corporate ladder, and you're there for your whole career, right?
Yeah. And that was I guess the first part of my professional life. I was in the insurance industry, and a lot of people kind of like shake their heads when they hear the word insurance industry, but the world goes around because there's insurance. It's really just another way of financing risk and advancing your business. I was in the commercial lines area, and it was fascinating, to learn about different businesses, to know which ones are prone to losses and which ones aren't, based on their operations. It was just really fascinating. But I worked for big companies during the time when, they actually had relocation policies. They moved you places, which was, actually a benefit to both the worker as well as the company, because of the diversity of experience and exchange of talent and you don't get that as much in a virtual environment, so it's a harder environment especially for, I think, younger people to advance and gain the breadth of experience that I was able to have.
That's a really interesting point I've never thought of, Elizabeth, because I was relocated a couple of times for the big businesses I worked for. And yeah, you get a completely different experience, so much different than doing it virtual, right? When
Yeah.
you're living in the culture, when you're living, and when I say culture, I was never stationed overseas, but growing up in California in the same house for, my whole life, basically, and then all of a sudden I'm thrown into Toronto, Canada, where things are cold, right? Because I grew up in California. They're cold, and then I spent time in San Francisco Bay Area, in Arkansas. Completely different cultures, business cultures, and new people. It's a very exciting and highly educational experience.
I totally agree. I went from Buffalo, New York to New Orleans, to
Oh,
Oklahoma
wow.
City, to Cleveland, to Chicago a couple of times, to Minneapolis, to Long Island, to New York City, to Bermuda. I
Yes.
mean, it was just a world of difference every single time, not only your coworkers, but also the clients you were working with were different. And, settling into a new place, it was, in retrospect, really a gift.
Yeah, but that's not happening like it was.
No.
Um, so what's going on today? What are you seeing out there? Because you're not in big corporate anymore. Obviously, you're seeing some change. So what are you seeing out there?
Well, to go back to what you started with, I think nowadays younger people really are thinking about portfolio careers and having multiple streams of income at the same time. Not only because it's okay to have more than one job, if you will, but people are worried and they want to have multiple revenue streams. So because there isn't the ability to rely on that big company that you might ultimately have a pension with and is going to take care of you. I mean, even today, looking at the headlines, AI and, the layoffs that are coming, from the people that ran technology in the past for technology companies. So you just never know what's around the corner. And I think people have gotten to be feeling a little more the need to be self-reliant, which is, I think, created an interesting dynamic because the large companies, they want stable workers when they want them, but then they want to be able
And
to
then
make
they'll cut them
changes
loose.
when they
Yeah.
need to,
Yeah.
or perceive that they need to. So those are hard choices, and so I think that that's ushered in between technology, which has enabled all of this, Zoom meetings and all the technology platforms out there. It's ushered in a whole new world of work. I mean, years ago we talked about the globalization and how work was being distributed
Yeah.
around the world. And that's even accelerated with the advancements in technology, and now more and more to AI tools that can do real work.
When you were talking about that, it tickled my brain a little bit, in that 120 years ago, we had the Industrial Revolution kick off. Well, maybe even
Mhm.
150 years ago, where people went from portfolio careers. If you were a farmer, you didn't
Yeah,
just farm wheat, you farmed wheat and soy or whatever, and you were self-reliant.
yeah.
Right? And we moved into the Industrial Revolution, where big companies now provided work for people. Now we're almost doing an anti we're moving back to portfolio careers, right?
Yeah.
We're farmers of data, I guess. I don't know, independent. I, but that's an interesting dynamic that we're experiencing.
Absolutely. And I it's just a very disruptive time,
It's very disruptive. Yeah.
and then you had something like COVID, throw that in a couple of years ago, and for many small businesses, they were really very local businesses before COVID. And really, when COVID happened, it forced people to learn how to be virtual businesses, how to be remote businesses, to set up e-commerce shops and things like that. So it forced a lot of small businesses, into the world of technology, which may or may not have happened had it not been for COVID. But everyone was in the same place. You didn't have a choice. And the companies that survived were the ones that learned how to utilize technology to further their business.
Yeah, it was an interesting time for a catalyst, right, for digital
Yeah.
transformation. Um, and yeah, so where does that lead us today? That was 5 years ago. We're coming up on 6 years,
I know.
right? March 13th, 2020. I remember the day. We're coming up on 6 years since that event happened and changed the world. It really did change the
Oh,
world
man.
fundamentally. Um, and now we're seeing, what are the effects of that on the workplace? Elizabeth, what are you seeing?
Well, this kind of launches me into, the area of work that I've become specialized in. Um, after moving around in the corporate world, I up and joined a startup 24 years ago, a tech startup in New York, and it didn't succeed for a variety of reasons. But really, that's what launched me into entrepreneurship. I knew I didn't want to go back to work for a big company because I enjoyed the freedom and the excitement of
Oh,
plowing
you
new
got the
ground.
adrenaline. You got the adrenaline
Oh,
pump, didn't you?
totally, totally did. So I just started to do some consulting for smaller businesses, and that's not my particular jam, as they say these days. But what I discovered was that while I had a really broad background from corporate America, I would get clients where I needed some additional expertise to help round out my skill set. And I discovered freelancers. And 10, 15 years ago, when I started to hire freelancers, people thought freelancers were just people who couldn't get real jobs, not
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they
that's
were
exactly.
professionals.
Yeah.
And no one thought twice about an accountant or a lawyer being a contract worker. They don't think of them as freelancers, but they were contract workers, which is essentially what freelance work is. And so I discovered that this enormous wealth of talent out there that was freelancing. And there were a number of platforms at the time. Elance and Odesk were the two biggies, which now are Upwork. And no one had ever heard of them. There wasn't a Fiverr at the time. So there's been a lot of evolutions in platforms, but I became kind of a power user of the platforms at the time to find freelancers to round out my project teams. And what was interesting is my clients started to ask me to find them a freelancer because they liked the ones I had. It gave them a whole new view of what a freelancer could be, that it was a professional skilled at a particular thing. And so that's what really started this whole process for me, is understanding the talent that's out there in freelancing. And today everyone doesn't blink when you hear the word fractional. But 10 years ago, that wasn't even a word anybody understood.
That was someone
And
that got laid off from a big corporation that couldn't find a job. That's what it
yeah,
was, right?
yeah, exactly. And so I
And it
think
is.
that, on top of the things we've already been discussing about the move to virtual, and the changes in how companies operate, and the instability in the job market, more and more people start with a side hustle. And then when they feel confident that they can support themselves, choose to leave corporate and do that thing. And some have multiple businesses. And I think younger people are starting businesses in college and being influencers or writers or whatever. There's so many options to distribute your value to the world and figure out a way to monetize that value. And so I think that we are in a completely different world. Big companies hire tons of freelancers. And, there's in fact, my sense is the Upwork, their target client is increasingly an enterprise client, while they have offerings down market as well. So I think that everyone's realized that the flexibility of freelance talent and the quality of freelance talent out there is a real option, both for the worker as well as for the company, large and small.
This is really interesting because you mentioned two aspects to this change. One is the individual and making that jump into freelancing and fractional for more seasoned, we'll use the word seasoned professionals like yourself and I, right? That could be very scary,
Mhm.
right? When we first do that. But for younger people, that may be all they know.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk first about the Gen X and the baby boomers, right? That are out there a little bit, people that are already, engaged in corporate life. How do you make that transition? Because it's always itching in the back of my head. How much can I trust the big corporation, right? Because hey, layoffs come, layoffs go,
Yeah.
and you're just a number, right? AI is going to decide who gets hired and fired in the future. So how do I make that jump without being forced to make that jump?
Well, I think it's probably best not to think of it as a jump. I
Oh,
think of
okay.
it more as is multiple paths at the same time. And, any corporation is gonna want your full-time devotion, during business hours. And I think that's gotta be respected as they're paying, providing a salary, benefits, whatever the deal might be. But on the side, people can start developing other options, whether it's writing for a living or consulting or cat sitting, whatever it might be. I mean, it's I think that there's an expanded view of the world that it's not so much 9 to 5, or 8 to 4. I mean, it's like not that you can make your own hours, if you have to be there for a company or for the company's clients, but, increasingly you can do multiple things with technology. You can have your own website. You can have a Substack account. I mean, there's so many different things that people can do, and I think that, uh, while I've not lived as a Gen X or Gen Z or millennial or any of that, I think that that's the mode these days. I mean, they're thinking of other things to do to monetize value in their dorm rooms, and so
Yeah.
when they move into a job, which can still be enormously valuable in terms of salary, experience, opportunity, they're doing other things anyway. So I think that as some of those side things take off, it's a natural path as opposed to a leap. Not for everybody. It all depends. To me, it all depends on your entrepreneurial skills. I mean, there's no safety net when you're an entrepreneur. I mean, you've got to make it work. There's no one to pass the buck to. And so not everyone's suited for that. I think some people are suited for a more stable environment, corporate environment. And finding security in that kind of environment means keeping your skills up. So you're kind of ahead of the curve, if you will, and,
Yeah.
and not being complacent that your job's always going to be there because you just don't know.
Yeah,
So I
what
think that
yeah, what are some of those skills? Because you mentioned, hey, the entrepreneurial skills. What are some of those skills that because you can develop skills. So some people have them innately in them, but so what are some of those skills that people could develop to be more resilient? I guess resiliency is probably the top one, right?
well, it is, but, I think of where I would start is more interpersonal skills and networking skills, because I have found that networking is not a bad word. Networking can be fun. If you're curious, if you go into it with the objective of being interested in the other party and learning what you can, it's amazing what you do learn and how maybe not at that moment, but down the line, those connections that you make pay off, not only in terms of just the value of learning other people, but opportunities do come from that. And so I think that networking needs to be an important component of everyone's lives, whether you're, in a big corporation or not. And the larger your network is, the more um, quality your network is, not just, "Oh, I linked up with, half a dozen people on LinkedIn," but that you build genuine relationships. Those are the genuine relationships are the things that lead from one thing to the other. And I found no matter what it is I try to accomplish, um, you can't just kinda ask ChatGPT how to go do this. It's like you end up
It
depending on
involves
these
people. Yeah.
relationships in
Yeah.
people. So I think that's the foundation, is to not be afraid of building a network. It's not selling. You're just curious and you're talking about what makes you tick, and you find alignment. And I think that is an important skill. And to and to I mean, it's like when I go to a networking meeting and maybe a different kind of meeting I've not been to before, I go look for the person who's not talking to anybody. that person's happy to talk to me because they're kind of feeling lost too. So there's so
Yeah.
many ways to get started without feeling like you have to go talk to the most popular girl or boy, in the room.
Oh gosh, this is bringing you back middle school and high school. Oh, so I love that. I love that networking. Yeah, I see that in my own career. That's how I got jobs, was through networking.
Yeah, and you still do. I mean,
And you still
that's
do.
that's the way around AI is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
network.
yeah. Yeah, your network. I love it. Okay, let's flip to the other side, which is on the corporate side, right? Now I've got, where do I go to find these fractional workers? Let's say I'm a mid-sized company. My focus, let's say that I am I don't know, let's pick a steel door and frame manufacturer, right? Maybe I do $30 million a year. So I'm a small, mid-sized company. And I hear all this AI stuff. My website looks like it was done by my nephew. Um, where do I start? How in the world do I find freelancers? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Besides calling Elizabeth, right?
Well, I think that there are plenty of choices, and I will say, not in a self-promoting sense, it's good to talk to some people in your network that understand the fractional world, that operate in it, whether it's a staffing company or a recruiter, those or HR professional. Those are all people that have experience with this world because whether you're talking about a $30 million business or a $300,000 business, going to a big platform and typing in "I need a," fill in the blank, you're gonna get matched with. I mean, it's good information in, good information out. It's the quality of your prompt. If to use ChatGPT terminology, you're going to get 5,000 resumes that matched whatever you typed in. And what a horrible thing. How do you go through 5,000 resumes? It's not productive, and you don't even know if those are good matches. You have to do all this curation. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's I think people are kidding themselves when they think, "Oh, I will just go do it myself." Because, there's just plenty of in a big corporation, you have HR, you have people helping you to prevent bad, costly hires, and you'd have no protection, working with platforms. So I think it's useful to talk to people in your network that have experience that can help you know where to go and how to curate. And curation starts with proper definition of what you need. Because if you start with a proper definition, you're going to do better
Do
matching
better.
with the candidates that are close to what you're looking for.
No, I love that. It's almost like online dating,
Yeah,
right? You got to know what you're looking for, and a lot of times it's your friends are going to introduce you to someone, right?
yeah.
So it's the same kind of concept that goes back to that networking thing. What are some of the best practices or pitfall? Let's talk about pitfalls first on going with a fractional team, um, that you need to watch out for.
Well, I think first and foremost is really figuring out what is fractional work and what is full-time work. I mean, fractional
Okay.
does not replace full-time. I mean, when you get a company of $30 million, like you just revenue that you just mentioned, there's going to be a staff to that firm. And I always talk in terms of core and non-core work. And I kind of define core work as that work that a client pays you for, that delivers value to the market. And that's the work that you probably need full-time people doing. They're committed, they have a stake in the company, whatever it is. And they're part of your brand. You know, non-core work is where I think fractionals are particularly useful. Whether it's you might not need a full-time CFO, but you might need a controller and a part-time CFO that could be contractual. I mean, no one thinks twice about really accounting or
Or
attorneys,
lawyers. Yeah.
but those are fractional workers. You use them when you need them. Very few companies need a general
Truth,
counsel.
truth.
And so it's the same kind of philosophy. What is the work that, isn't day to day that's crucial to the lifeline of my company. But you still need skilled help. You just don't need it full time. And to me, that non-core work is the place to look first, because it's not directly touching a customer or the value stream.
I like that. And finding your core is probably the most important thing you can do there,
Hmm.
right? Some
Well,
people, it's easy.
yeah, there's so many methodologies out there, but I just think it's really simple. What does your client pay for? That's core. What's a cost to you that is necessary to support delivering your value? That's the non-core stuff. It could be still really, really important to your company, but to me, that's where to look first.
Okay, that makes sense. Any concerns around intellectual property? Because fractional workers, right? They're working for lots of different companies. So
Well,
if your IP is core, then right, you don't want fractional workers creating all your IP, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, no, I mean, some of it you can deal with contracts like work for hire and things like that, but that still doesn't mean that your work's protected. And even with AI today, is your work protected? I
Not
mean,
really, no.
so I think it's a bit of an alarmist thing. I think it's real, but again, if you've got IP, then that's something that people that have a vested interest in protecting that IP should be the ones working with it. And then you should create a working relationship with less sensitive, less risky materials. A lot of people come to me and they talk, what should I outsource first? And I always say, wade in, do a little bit at a time, get used to it. Start with the lowest risk stuff. Don't put your intellectual property at risk. Do the things that, are more commodity kind of works. Those are the things to start with until you develop confidence. I mean, in time, the best freelancers, they want steady gigs. They're not interested in looking for a new gig every 2 months. So if you build a relationship, you go into it building a relationship with those fractional workers and trust them, build trust both ways. And the freelancer has to like working with you the same way you need to like working with the freelancer. I mean, it's a relationship. And I think that if you build those relationships, properly, um, you know, your IP is as protected as it's going to be. I mean,
It's
there's no
gonna be,
assurance
yeah,
that
yeah, you're
somebody
right.
that works for you doesn't leave and takes
Yeah,
your material.
absolutely. All right, so if I'm dealing with fractional workers, I have to be a little bit more on my toes about my processes. Or do these fractional teams that you bring in have their own processes and I'm paying for that as well? Like having an accountant. I don't know what the accounting best practices are, right? I mean, that's why I'm hiring. So where's that fine line between your processes and the processes coming in with the fractional team? It's how I've got to manage this. This is not something that I just say, oh, whatever you say is fine. That just doesn't cut it, right?
No, exactly. So process is really at the heart of being able to delegate. And I'm going to take an aside to say that I think that something I call the delegation engine is really the fundamental answer to your question. And to me, the delegation engine is thinking broadly about the idea of delegation. Delegation can be delegation to process is a thing. Because you're establishing a protocol for how you want work done to deliver the value the way you want to deliver it. So even if you've defined only a handful of processes for your business, make sure they're the right ones that really are the ones that reflect how you want to deliver your value to the market. After you've defined process, then you pick your tools. And then the tools are the things that fit your process, not the other way around. A lot of people buy tools, then try to retrofit their organization to the tool. And I think that's backward. And only after you've outsourced to process, then to tools, then should you outsource to people. And that's the cleanest way to think about it, because if you've identified your process, then you tell the freelancer, this is how I want the work done. Now, plenty of freelancers are really good at process, and because they've had to be. So you can ask a freelancer to help define your process, but it's something that the business should always decide, yes, this is how I want to do it, rather than just accepting somebody else's way of doing business. But, freelancers will fill in the gap, fill a vacuum. If there's no direction, they'll go, well, let's do it this way. But hopefully they're always asking the client's permission. Like, does this make
Yeah,
sense
yeah,
to you?
yeah,
Does
yeah.
this work for your business?
Hey, this has been really, really fascinating. I see a whole new um, emerging marketplace for all of this. It's going to be an interesting time in the next 10 years to see how these big corporations, and because we still want to provide value, and
Oh, yeah.
sometimes you need a big corporation to provide value. Like at Intel where I work, you can't do fractional fabs. I can't go because I got to raise $20 billion to build a fab, right? I can't do that part-time on the side, right? But there will be a lot of fractional workers that will be providing a lot of value in that whole value chain. So this is a really fascinating shift in our economy that I'm really excited to see what happens.
I am too. It's fun to be in the middle of it.
It is. So Elizabeth, if people want to find out more from you or engage with you, how do they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Eiss, as you can read on the monitor there. But my company is called Results Resourcing because we do that. We resource results for solopreneurs and small employers in particular, using vetted virtual freelance teams in the United States and Canada. So we're all about helping entrepreneurs realize their vision and achieve the impact that they want. So my website is Results Resourcing. It's .com or .net. And on LinkedIn, connect with me, and love to talk to entrepreneurs and help them figure out how to scale their business.
This is awesome, Elizabeth. You're at the tip of the spear, changing the world, one client
I
at a
hope
time.
so.
So thank you for being that entrepreneur and being out there at the tip.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to talk to you about it, Darren.
Thanks for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation. If you enjoyed today's conversation, give us 5 stars on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. It really helps others discover the show. If you want to go deeper, join our exclusive community at patreon.com/embracingdigital, where we share bonus content and you can always connect with other change makers like yourself. You can always find more resources at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, keep embracing the digital transformation.